Welcome to this course entitled EPA's Spill Prevention Control and Countermeasure Rule, SPCC Plan Options and Contents. I'm Doug Dean, your instructor, and I'm happy you're here. This presentation represents Part 2 of a three-part series on the SPCC rule. Part 1 dealt with the question, does the SPCC rule apply to my company? After going through that evaluation and determining that the answer is yes, then the next question might be, what are my SPCC plan options and what is required of each option? That is the question addressed by this presentation. So let's begin. It should be noted that much of the material presented here was taken from an EPA reference written for its inspectors. This document, which is referenced throughout this course, is free for download and is recommended for anyone needing periodic guidance to help ensure SPCC compliance. In addition to this guidance, I've relied on my personal experience in developing SPCC plans for all types of facilities, including small businesses having just a few oil containers, electric utilities with hundreds of SPCC regulated transformers, facilities with over 1 million gallons of oil storage required, in addition to SPCC, a facility response plan, and inclusion of the SPCC requirements into EPA's Integrated Contingency Plan model that can be used not only for SPCC plan compliance, but also compliance with several other programs, all written into one document. As an introduction, let's do a quick review of the SPCC rule. SPCC is an Environmental Protection Agency program that is authorized by the Clean Water Act. The SPCC regulation is found specifically at the Title 40 of the Code of Federal Regulations, Part 112, or simply 40 CFR Part 112. This regulation was initially published in 1973 and has been modified substantially since that time. What is the SPCC plan? The SPCC rule establishes requirements to prepare and implement written SPCC plans. The purpose of the plan is to form a comprehensive oil spill prevention program that minimizes the potential for discharges. The plan must address all relevant spill prevention, control, and countermeasures necessary at the specific facility. SPCC plans complement existing laws, regulations, rules, standards, policies, and procedures pertaining to safety, fire prevention, and, of course, oil pollution prevention. Lastly, do states have SPCC rules? The answer is yes. Although SPCC is a federal regulation, its requirements often intersect with state regulations and even local ordinances. For example, in Florida, the Department of Environmental Protection enforces rules for above-ground storage tanks, and many of those tanks are also SPCC regulated. Even beyond this, some states, such as New Jersey, New York, and others, have developed their own oil spill prevention statutes, which takes the federal requirements and adds to them. State requirements must be considered when developing an SPCC plan. The agenda for this course is as follows. First, we'll discuss the SPCC plan for non-qualified facilities. This is the standard plan that is used for most industrial applications. Then we'll discuss the Tier 1 and Tier 2 SPCC plans for qualified facilities. Then we'll move on to discussing the multi-site SPCC plan format and end with the Integrated Contingency Plan model developed by EPA and other agencies. There are a couple of important definitions that are essential to this course. The first is a non-qualified facility. Actually, this is sort of a default way of expressing the fact that the regulated facility does not meet the definition of qualified facility. In other words, the amount of oil stored exceeds the amount allowed for a qualified facility, or the frequency and volume of oil spills reaching navigable waters or their shorelines exceeds what is permissible for a qualified facility. Because the facility is non-qualified, it is not eligible for the streamlined SPCC requirements allowed for qualified facilities. In order to meet the definition of a qualified facility, the facility must meet certain criteria. The first hurdle is that the above-ground oil storage capacity aggregate is 10,000 gallons or less. If yes, then the next test is, in the 3 years prior to needing an SPCC plan, there has not been a single discharge of oil to navigable water or adjoining shorelines greater than 1,000 gallons, or there has not been 2 discharges exceeding 42 gallons of oil during any 12-month period. A facility that meets these criteria is a qualified facility. Of course, this is not a permanent designation. For example, if you add a 15,000-gallon oil storage tank to your site, then it is no longer a qualified facility and it requires a full plan. So our first topic is the SPCC plan for a non-qualified facility. This section will cover some of the terms and concepts that are foundational to understanding what an SPCC plan should contain. This discussion of SPCC plan options will begin with a summary of the SPCC regulations found in 40 CFR Part 112. Let's take just a brief moment to go over these. Parts 112.1 and 112.2 provide the criteria for SPCC applicability and the definitions needed to help determine whether the rules apply to a facility. These were covered thoroughly in Part 1 of this SPCC course. For facilities that determine they are regulated, Part 112.3 primarily specifies compliance deadlines in meeting the rule requirements. However, the requirement for having a PE certify the plan is also found in this part. Parts 112.4 and 112.5 specify the requirements and timelines for updating the plan, particularly after a reportable spill, and includes the spill data submission requirements. Part 112.6 describes the streamlined requirements for qualified facilities, which will be discussed later in this course. Part 112.7 and 112.8 provide the requirements for a full SPCC, which will also be discussed. Parts 112.9 through 112.11 are the requirements for oil production and drilling. A description of these requirements is beyond the scope of this course. Part 112.12 is the SPCC for animal fats and vegetable oils. The discussion of the SPCC plan for onshore petroleum facilities is largely the same as what is required for animal and vegetable-derived oils. Lastly, there is the requirements for the facility response plan. This plan applies only to facilities with large oil storage capacities and is not an SPCC plan, so it will be covered in a separate part of this course. So in this section, we want to focus on the SPCC plan for non-qualified facilities. This is the standard SPCC plan that has been most commonly prepared to meet the SPCC plan requirements. Once you have determined the SPCC plan is required, the primary regulations that need to be considered are found in the parts listed in this slide. The following slides will describe the manner in which these parts are addressed in the standard SPCC plan. Some of the important requirements specified in 40 CFR Part 112.3 include the deadlines for having an SPCC plan in place and the process for requesting extensions. This section covers SPCC plans of all types, such as those for animal fats and vegetable oils. In general, you must have an SPCC plan in place for a regulated oil facility before you begin operations. The SPCC must be certified by a professional engineer, and in the certification, the PE must attest to certain things. For example, that they are familiar with the SPCC requirements and they or their agent have visited and examined the facilities, and also the SPCC plan is adequate for the facility. You can see from this that just being a PE does not qualify a person to sign this certification. They must also understand the rule. Lastly, this section clarifies where the plan should be kept. If the facility is attended at least 4 hours a day, it should have a plan available. However, if it is not attended, like at an electric substation, then the plan is kept at the nearest field office. Sections 112.4 and 112.5 are the primary sections dealing with amending the plan based on events or on a regular review schedule. Section 112.4 deals with amendments following significant spills that get the agencies involved with your plan. Such is the case where you have a spill exceeding 1,000 gallons or 2 spills within a 12-month period exceeding 42 gallons. In these cases, you are required to submit the SPCC plan to EPA and the agency in charge of oil spills in the state where the facility is located. Upon review, they will likely make required statements on how the plan must be changed, along with other troublesome things like perhaps monetary fines. Part 112.5 deals with the non-spill related changes that must be made by the owner-operator to keep the plan current. The plan must be updated when changes to the facility occur that materially affect the potential for an oil discharge. Examples include changes such as adding oil storage containers, relocating containers, or demolition that might alter secondary containment structures. A PE must certify technical changes such as facility changes. If no changes occur, the plan must still be reviewed at least every 5 years. Names of new personnel and other minor changes do not require a PE signature, but technical changes such as facility modifications do require a PE signature at this review period. An SPCC plan must be prepared in accordance with good engineering practices. The plan must also have the full approval of management at a level of authority to commit the necessary resources to fully implement the plan. 40 CFR Part 112.7 includes the general plan requirements that apply to nearly all SPCC plans. A summary of required plan contents that apply to the most common type of facilities, onshore oil storage, is provided here. Please note that you must consult the rule to get the full description of what is required. The plan must include a physical layout of the facility and a facility diagram. The details of what must be included in the facility diagram are provided in 40 CFR Part 112 and are quite granular, such as identifying all regulated fixed and portable containers and piping. The oil discharge reporting procedures must be described, including the names of personnel responsible for reporting a spill. The procedures must include all the elements listed in the rule. The plan must include a prediction of the direction, rate of flow, and the total quantity of oil potentially released from each type of major equipment failure. The plan must be careful to describe the discharge prevention measures for all likely scenarios that are predicted to potentially cause a significant oil discharge. The plan must also include a description of containment or diversionary structures to contain a spill and prevent it from reaching water bodies. It is important to note here that the type of containment that is considered adequate is different for oil storage containers versus oil-filled equipment. Oil-filled equipment have less rigorous containment standards to meet. This is discussed in detail in Part 3 of this SPCC course. Continuing on with the general requirements for a full SPCC plan for an onshore oil storage facility, the plan must include a description of impracticable measures. This applies where you determine that some type of equipment or installation specified in the rule is impractical for your facility. In this case, you must explain in your plan why such measures are not practicable and the alternative measures used to provide equivalent protection against oil spills. The plan should include a description of inspections, tests, and records used to prevent oil spills. Records of the inspections and tests, signed by the appropriate supervisor or inspector, must be kept for a period of 3 years. The plan should describe the training provided to employees on an initial and an annual basis to allow them to be capable of fulfilling the requirements in the plan. The SPCC rule specifies that the briefing of the SPCC plan requirements and known spills be provided to oil handling employees at least on an annual basis. Security measures should be described, with the focus being on how you secure and control access to the oil handling, processing, and storage areas. Measures for preventing spills from facility tank cars and tank loading and unloading areas must also be described. In addition, the procedure for inspecting a tank truck for leaks before its departure must be included. Lastly, if your plan deviates from the SPCC Plan list of topics covered here, you must note the deviation so that it is clear that all required contents of the SPCC Plan can be easily located. (40 CFR 112.8) includes additional requirements that must be described in the plan for onshore oil storage facilities. Note that different requirements must be addressed in plans for oil production and drilling facilities or facilities involving oils from animal and vegetable oils. The plan for onshore facilities must meet all the general requirements just covered in 40 CFR 112.7. In addition, the plan must describe the measures used to control facility drainage with the potential to cause a harmful oil discharge. This includes the means of controlling drainage from diked areas around tanks and the means for controlling drainage from undiked areas, such as oil piping that is located outside a containment area. The plan must describe the measures used to manage containers of bulk oil storage containers, such as drums and above-ground tanks. For example, these facilities must have a means of containment for the entire capacity of the largest single container and sufficient freeboard to contain precipitation. Part 3 will cover bulk storage in more detail. Lastly, the plan must describe how facility oil transfer and pumping areas are managed. The SPCC rule specifies requirements for buried piping designed to prevent leaks from deterioration. It also specifies inspection requirements for piping and transfer areas. All of these 112.7 and 112.8 requirements might also be subject to state or local requirements. If applicable, these should also be considered for inclusion in the SPCC plan. To summarize this section on the standard non-qualified SPCC plans for onshore oil storage facilities, SPCC plans require management approval and certification by an SPCC knowledgeable PE. Plans must be amended and implemented according to Parts 112.3 and 112.4. Plans must address the topics listed in Parts 112.7 and 112.8. Plans must describe any deviation from the list of topics as described in the rule. Finally, any facility equipment, installation, or procedure described in the rule that is determined impractical must be described along with the measures for providing equal protection. Now let's discuss the options for an SPCC plan that is available to qualified facilities. The requirements for qualified facilities are found in 40 CFR Part 112.6. Before getting into the SPCC plan options for qualified facilities, it's very important to note the following. First, qualified facilities are facilities that are regulated according to the SPCC criteria discussed previously in Part 1, namely that they have enough oil to meet the 1,320-gallon threshold and also have the potential to cause a harmful discharge to navigable water. The advantage to a qualified facility is that the SPCC plan is more streamlined and can therefore be less expensive to develop and maintain. However, if the amount of oil storage increases or spills occur, then the switch to a full plan might be required. Lastly, qualified facilities that cause a spill to navigable waters must still report the incident in a timely manner to the EPA or possibly to state agencies. There is no leniency for the spill reporting requirements. As stated before, a spill can invalidate the qualified facility status. Qualified facilities come in two types, that is, Tier 1 and Tier 2, with two different sets of requirements. Determining whether a facility is Tier 1 or Tier 2 is as follows. First, is the facility above ground oil storage capacity 10,000 gallons or less? If so, then 3 years prior to the plan certification date, or since becoming subject to the rule, does the facility meet these requirements? It has not had a single discharge of greater than 1,000 gallons of oil to navigable waters or adjoining shorelines, or it has not had 2 discharges of oil to navigable water or adjoining shorelines, each exceeding 42 gallons within any 12-month period. If it meets those spill requirements and the facility has no individual above-ground oil container greater than 5,000 gallons, then it is a Tier 1 qualified facility. You can complete and self-certify an SPCC Plan template instead of developing a full PE-certified SPCC Plan. If, on the other hand, any individual oil container is greater than 5,000 gallons, but still less than 10,000 gallons aggregate, then it can be a Tier 2 qualified facility. There you must prepare a self-certified plan in accordance with 112.7 and subparts B and C of the rule instead of a PE certified plan. EPA has determined that the 5,000 gallon threshold was consistent with industry standards that require more stringency at this volume, in particular the Steel Tank Industries Institute standard SP001. The first qualified facility plan to discuss is the Tier 1. A qualified facility that meets the Tier 1 requirements can choose to complete and self-certify the SPCC Plan template found in Appendix G of the SPCC rule. The template is significantly more concise than a full SPCC plan, which oftentimes can be quite wordy in an attempt to show regulators that all topics in the SPCC rule have been considered. The format of the template is mostly fill in the blank and also providing sentences and tables to cover the required topics. Unlike the full plan, the owner-operator can complete the template without the involvement of a PE. In addition, in lieu of the PE, the owner-operator can sign the certification statement. The certification language of this statement is like the PE certification, that is, the certifier is familiar with the applicable requirements of 40 CFR 112 and certifies that the plan, that is, the template, meets sound industry practices and standards. Obviously, there is a potential cost savings in not needing a PE consultant to develop, sign, and seal a plan. However, the owner-operator should consider the liability of signing this statement if they are not familiar with the rule or not able to know if the plan is adequate. The chances of this signature backfiring might be low, unless a major spill occurs, in which case the agencies will likely arrive at the doorstep with some hard questions. Similar to the Tier 1 facility, the owner-operator can sign their own certification statement instead of a PE. However, the template cannot be used to meet the SPCC requirement. A full written plan must be prepared. There is an advantage with the Tier 2 approach. If for some reason a requirement in the SPCC rule cannot be met, such as a full containment around a tank, the Tier 2 owner-operator has the option of proposing an equivalent protective measure. The Tier 1 plan facilities cannot deviate from the SPCC requirements. In some situations, the Tier 2 flexibility might represent a substantial cost savings. A search on the internet revealed that some state agencies and commercial firms have developed a template for a full plan, so the preparation of this document might be less challenging than starting from scratch. Use of a template does not erase the need to be familiar with the SPCC requirements or include all topics in the plan. Like the Tier 1, the Tier 2 plan requires a signature by the owner-operator or their representative certifying the plan using language similar to the PE certification. This might be a stumbling block to using the Tier 2 approach. In summary, some things to consider when considering the use of a Tier 1 or Tier 2 option for compliance. The self-certifier must be familiar with the SPCC rules and standards and attest to this fact. There's also the issue of whether there are state regulations that need to be integrated into the SPCC plan. This might present an additional challenge to a non-professional. Amendment of the plan and updates under the general requirements for SPCC plans, that is in 40 CFR 112.7, still apply to the Tier 1 and Tier 2 plans. State engineering requirements might impact the SPCC plan certification. Some states require a PE to perform certain functions, including certifying SPCC plans. Check with your state's engineering licensing board to find out if it prohibits SPCC plan self-certification. Lastly, an increase of oil above thresholds can lose the Tier 1 status and qualified facility status. Therefore, any benefits resulting from the qualified facility options might be temporary. To summarize this section on Tier 1 and Tier 2 plan options, the Tier 1 template is an EPA form that allows owner-operators to do their own plan. The Tier 2 plan is a full plan that still allows owner-operators to self-certify. Advantages of the tiered plans include more owner-operator engagement and potential cost savings from not using a PE services. Possible disadvantages include a poorly written plan or not being able to meet certification criteria, possibly resulting in non-compliance. This section deals with the SPCC plan for multi-site facilities. Most SPCC plans are written to address a single regulated facility or several facilities located at the same site. But what about the situation where there are numerous facilities scattered over different geographic locations? In this case, the SPCC plan format for multi-site facilities might prove very useful, as we will now consider. To begin, the multi-site plan has been explicitly endorsed by EPA. In its SPCC Amendments Preamble in the December 5, 2008 Federal Register, EPA stated that owners-operators may combine multiple facilities into a single SPCC plan, incorporating common elements such as spill prevention measures or reporting procedures into a core plan and attaching to the core plan site-specific information. Unlike the tiered plan regulation, this is not a special multi-site regulation, but stems from the rule's flexibility in defining what is a facility. In the case of the multi-site plan, a facility may be considered a general description of individual facilities that share common oil container characteristics and spill prevention measures. Combining similar facilities reduces the compliance burden while maintaining environmental protection. All of the SPCC requirements must still be met with this type of format, but in a way that is highly efficient. The plan is particularly suited to certain types of companies. An example is an oil production business, which has similar operations such as storage terminals and drilling sites scattered over a large region. In addition to oil production, electric utility substations with oil-filled transformers over their distribution system can benefit greatly by using a multi-site plan. Separate plans for dozens or hundreds of sites would multiply the effort and expense of ongoing compliance. Consolidating these sites into a single document results in large cost and administrative savings in terms of plan preparation, review, and updates. In addition, Having one plan reduces the possibility of inconsistencies between plans that are prepared at different times and places. Overall, managing a single plan is much easier than multiple plans, and it's also scalable. There are some best practices that apply to multi-site plans. First, it is recommended that they be developed using a modular design. This means to develop a core plan that includes all the shared facility information and practices such as inspection frequency, security measures, employee training, and spill response measures. Site-specific information can be included in appendices or separate volumes. This makes updates easier by allowing plan amendments only to the affected sites. For version control and accessibility, maintain the plan at a central location. Site-specific excerpts or the complete digital version of the plan can be maintained at each site. Ensure that the plan is available during working hours. The certifier, whether the PE or self-certification, may attest to the entire plan. However, the certifier must be able to attest that they have examined the facilities, either in person or through a designated agent. For example, in the case of an electric utility, this might be accomplished by having the PE team with the substation operations manager as the agent who routinely visits all sites. Facility diagrams will be needed for each specific site. Often the site drawing for the site construction will suffice. A high-level overview map can supplement these diagrams for identifying locations of facilities and their proximity to navigable waters. Depicted here is an example of the table of contents for a multi-site core plan prepared by Matrix Compliance Services. Section 1 provides the administrative activities and contents that are common to all facilities included in the plan. This section includes such topics as the process of plan revisions following spill events or how to deal with material changes to a facility, certifications, and a discussion of how the plan meets applicable state requirements. Section 2 provides a general description of the facilities in the plan. This description is general enough to cover all facilities, but specific enough to include useful information such as the type of oil involved, the facility operations and functions. Other subsections are discussions of the overall site drainage features, security measures, spill history, and routine inspections. If there is something unique that cannot be described adequately in a general manner, then it is described in the site-specific information included in the appendices. In a similar manner, Section 3 describes oil spill prevention measures used at the various facilities. Note that the section includes the potential causes of oil spill release from a facility. One might wonder how a general overall description for oil spill scenarios can be made, but in the case of facilities that are very similar in operation and function, this can typically be done with adequate precision. Again, any significant deviation from the general discussions can be addressed in the site-specific sections. Section 4 of the core plan would include the oil spill response processes. This information lends itself well to a core plan because, with few exceptions, oil spill and emergency response processes apply to all the facilities that present similar hazards and risks. Exceptions might occur where you have facilities located in different states and the agencies involved have specific oil spill reporting and coordination processes that must be followed. Shown at the bottom of this example core plan are references to various materials that are supplemental to the core plan, such as inspection forms, agency guidance, and site-specific facility information. Shown here is an example of a site-specific information format that might be useful for a substation. It shows the location of a facility on a topographic map, which depicts the locations of nearby wetlands and navigable waters relative to the facility. The land contours on the map provide information on the slope and direction of a potential oil spill should one occur. Site-specific information can also include such things as the coordinates of the site, because site addresses can be misread, the number of oil-filled transformers and the volume of oil in these transformers, and the approximate distance of the facility to the nearest water body. At the bottom is a small table added where site-specific SPCC requirements are mentioned, such as the location of oil spill equipment, security measures, and site-specific spill prevention measures, such as sized secondary containment. For topics such as containment, the core plan can discuss the range of containment measures used, such as containment pits or diversion to on-site impoundments, and the site-specific information can identify which of these measures are established for this particular facility. The efficiency of using the multi-site approach is evident here. If a change is made at this particular facility that requires revision, only the facility's information page shown here is revised. The rest of the core plan can remain intact. To summarize the multi-site plan format, the multi-site plan format offers clear advantages to companies with multiple regulated facilities that have similar oil operations and oil handling activities. The multi-site plan can be implemented effectively and at lower cost. The multi-site plan format is voluntary, it's not a regulatory requirement. Exercise care to ensure all SPCC elements are addressed in the core plan. Ensure care to ensure that all SPC elements are addressed either in the core plan or in the site-specific attachments. The last option discussed in this presentation is the Integrated Contingency Plan format, sometimes referred to as the One Plan. The Integrated Contingency Plan format emerged as a result of a problem. Let's begin this topic by looking at the problem that companies often encounter when developing and maintaining emergency response plans required by different agencies. First, different agencies, both federal and state, regulate the same chemicals and substances. For example, chlorine is regulated by EPA in its SARA Title III rules and its Risk Management Program rules, and by Chemical Release Reporting rules, as well as several federal OSHA rules. Next, most of these rules require documented emergency procedures. The rule requirements that are required for a particular plan often overlap with requirements for a different plan, so there is a lot of potential overlap between regulations. Because of the potential regulatory overlap that might be reflected in the plans developed to meet various rules, there is often duplication of procedures and efforts in a company's plans. If a company does not take great care in making these plans consistent, plans might actually have conflicting information. This is ironic because a company might be fined for having inconsistent information when part of the problem is the challenge of meeting all the rules that the agencies created. The Integrated Contingency Plan, or ICP guidance, was released in 1996 to help solve this thorny issue. The objective of the Integrated Contingency Plan format is similar to that of the multi-site plan. However, instead of combining facilities into a single plan, this format combines several regulatory programs to meet different agency regulations into a single document. One of the programs that can be integrated into this format is the SPCC Plan. The guidance for developing an Integrated Contingency Plan, or ICP, was published in the Federal Register on June 5, 1996. The stated intent supported by EPA was to provide a mechanism for consolidating the various plans that companies had prepared to comply with various regulations into one functional emergency response plan. This guidance is non-mandatory. The one plan format is an option that can be selected, or the company can opt to maintain several plans. It is simply a tool for companies to achieve greater efficiency and effectiveness in meeting their regulatory obligations. The programs that can be consolidated into a one plan are numerous and include the following: the Record Contingency Plan required for hazardous waste generators, the SPCC Plan, the Facility Response Plan required for large oil storage facilities, the Emergency Response Plan required for numerous chemical and industrial operations, the HAZWOPER Emergency Plan required for waste treatment operations and cleanup sites, and the Process Safety Risk Management Program requirements by EPA for certain chemicals. If needed, even other regulatory programs can be added, such as the applicable state regulations. The benefits of having a consolidated plan are clear. Having numerous plans, as many companies do, creates enormous challenges in making all these separate plans consistent and compliant. If one or two plans need significant revisions, most likely this affects all the other programs. By having this emergency response information consolidated, the revisions, training, equipment, and other aspects of compliance can be achieved in an effective manner and at less cost. The Integrated Contingency Plan format consists of three parts. The first part is the introductory section, which provides the table of contents, general facility information, applicability, scope, and cross-references to specific regulatory requirements. The next section is the core plan. The ICP core plan differs from the SPCC multi-site core plan because of the difference in objectives. With the SPCC core plan, the goal is to try and cover as much SPCC required information in a general way to satisfy compliance, whether it's administrative or prevention of response. With the ICP core plan, the objective is more focused on one topic: effective instant response. This section of the plan should be concise and easy to follow. A rule of thumb is that the core plan should fit in the glove box of an emergency response vehicle. The core plan sections cover the full sequence of actions taken for instant response, starting with instant reporting procedures, to initial response actions, to implementing the instant command structure that is typically based on the National Instant Command System used by emergency services, and finally to basic procedures for containment, recovery, and termination of the incident. Post-incident measures such as the cleanup of environmental contamination are also included in the core plan. The last part of the ICP is the supporting annexes. These annexes include detailed, site-specific or regulatory-specific information such as facility diagrams, chemical inventories, training schedules, and inspection procedures required to meet specific regulations. Annexes are not meant to duplicate information that is already contained in the core plan, but to augment core plan information. The ICP format includes a series of regulatory matrices, also called cross-reference matrices. These matrices are one of the most practical tools contained in the ICP. Imagine being an EPA inspector tasked with determining a company's compliance with several EPA programs, including SPCC, RCRA, or risk management programs. You have a checklist targeted to each particular program, but instead of separate documents, you are handed a single document that has all the various program documents crammed into a single plan. Without proper cross-references, you might be a little irritated trying to sort it all out. The ICP requires that all the elements in the plan be mapped to the various regulations that the plan is intended to satisfy. In the ICP format, Annex 8 of the ICP outline is specifically entitled Regulatory Compliance and Cross-Reference Matrices. The ready-made cross-references included in the ICP guidance can be customized to fit a particular company's regulatory compliance needs. These matrices help companies document their compliance in a clear, auditable way. They allow plan reviews to quickly verify that all the required elements are in fact addressed. This ensures that the ICP is a regulatory-friendly document. The last thing a company wants during an agency inspection is an unhappy auditor. It should be noted that the initial development of the matrices for an ICP is no easy feat. You can see an example from one of my previous plans that applied to just the introductory part of the ICP. Getting into the other sections of the ICP required many more rows and much more areas of the matrix to be completed. It is a mid to senior level task to develop the matrices, and even then I'd recommend a second or third pair of eyes to review your work and ensure all regulations have been addressed. The good news is, once the matrices are complete, the work that follows in reviewing and updating multiple plans gets much easier. So the message here is, accomplish the short-term pain to produce long-term comfort. In the long term, these matrices are worth the effort. Let's summarize this section with a summary of benefits of the ICP. With the Integrated Contingency Plan, one effective plan is preferred over multiple questionable plans prepared at different times and places. One plan is easier to effectively train responders. The plan saves time on plan reviews and updates, and the ICP is organized to facilitate inspections and audits. This completes this Part 2 presentation focused on SPCC options. I hope that you received some valuable takeaways from this course and will plan on attending the Part 3 discussion of oil spill prevention and response measures. Until then, you can see my contact information on the last slide. I encourage you to visit my website and see the services I offer, and if interested, please fill out a form or send me an email to discuss your concerns. I look forward to hearing from you. Until next time, have a great day.